Chapter 20. Borshch and porridge à la Buteyko, a meal and a farewell chat. Preparations for Natalia Voronova's trip to Leningrad were completed in January 1965. One evening in early February, she called at Dr Buteyko's house. She wanted to clarify some points and resolve a few delicate questions. Finding Buteyko alone in his flat was no easy matter. Anyone who was serious about getting to see him knew that. Even within his own four walls, the doctor's time was not his own. He was always extremely busy, surrounded by people desperate to take up the method. But Natalia was in luck. It was Buteyko himself who opened the door. He helped her off with her coat and invited her into the kitchen for tea and a bite to eat. Natalia knew the doctor's wife was often away on tour with the theatre for long periods, and so was not particularly surprised that it was the head of the household himself who did the honours in the kitchen. "I'm used to fending for myself," the doctor explained, a bit embarrassed, as he rinsed out a small enamel saucepan. He was in his trademark Ukrainian smock, worn over lightweight brown trousers, and he looked entirely at home. There wasn't much domestic coziness about the kitchen, though. It felt more like a kitchen in a student hostel. "Have you seen how I make my porridge?" asked Buteyko, using a grubby cloth to wipe away some crumbs stuck to the table. Natalia shook her head. Like everyone in the lab, she knew the doctor had a rather unusual diet. At staff parties she'd sometimes tasted something he'd cooked and heard how it was made, but until now she hadn't had a chance to actually see how he prepared his famous porridge. "I don't have any special diet," Buteyko would often say to his staff. "And mind you don't start a course of treatment by lecturing patients on what they should eat," he would caution. "Breathing, and breathing only. First and foremost, volitional reduction of the depth of breathing. Plenty of time later for porridge and such like." That was the doctor's basic principle. And he was right. The minute a trainer broke that rule, progress would be disrupted. Patients would set about making porridge from the recipes they'd heard and would be rewarded with some minor improvements in their health. But after that, there was no budging them any further. The work just ground to a halt, because usually patients began to rely on food rather than willpower. Basically, a food fix was easier, and thereafter any exercise of willpower was out of the question. Patients would pin their hopes on the power of special diets. Their willpower would evaporate, and they'd be left clutching at the minimal benefits that food fixes on their own could offer. You need to hammer home the message about breathing again and again, then mention food just once at the end. The author of The Volitional Elimination of Deep Breathing would insist. You need to hammer home the message about breathing again and again, then mention food just once at the end. The author of The Volitional Elimination of Deep Breathing would insist. You see, patients are stuffed full of pernicious ideas about the extraordinary powers of diets. It's rubbish, complete nonsense. If you breathe normally, you'll be healthy no matter what you eat, he would repeatedly assert. Despite this, however, the doctor did have a preferred dish, which he himself had created, a kind of porridge prepared in a special way. Of course, he could afford to have one. For a start, he knew the method inside out. And secondly, taking this porridge was a conscious decision he made only after a prolonged period of volitional training of his breathing. So there was no question of any weakening of willpower. The Buteykoites all knew the recipe for the porridge. Many of them, Natalia included, made it part of their intake. But it would be fascinating to actually watch Buteyko prepare this gruel that worked such wonders. "First we take some millet," said the doctor, reaching a small jar down from the top shelf. "Do you know the difference between millet and millet groats?" he asked. "Millet is the grain before it's been hulled and ground," he explained without waiting for an answer. "That's the only way it still has all its vitamins. As I told you all on our island trip, when my grandfather wanted to make porridge, he would go to the barn where he kept the millet sheaves." Buteyko turned the jar of millet from side to side. He'd put some in the mortar then and there, hull it, winnow it, grind it, and end up with top-quality millet groats. Groats that made porridge like porridge should be. According to the idiots in the Academy of Sciences, however, grain should be threshed and ground beforehand, destroying the best of the health-giving vitamins and micronutrients. But, Doctor, where do you get hold of millet like that? Asked Natalia, smiling her charming smile. She took hold of the jar of unhulled grain for a moment. Everything's processed nowadays, as you yourself said. Buteyko took an ordinary coffee grinder and opened the lid. You put the millet in a coffee grinder, he said. Where to get hold of it, you're asking? He went on, screwing up his eyes. He shook the grinder. It's not easy, that's for sure, but you'll find it if you try hard enough and you know where to look. At the moment, they still sell millet at the bird market, for example. Then we take whole grain rice, he continued, reaching down from the shelf another small jar containing whitish-grey grain. Now this you won't find at any bird market any more, he went on, handing Natalia the jar. You have to order it specially. He noticed the look of dismay on her face and exclaimed, There's no choice. Natural foodstuffs are getting dearer and dearer these days, now we're so civilized. Buteyko took the container from her again. This rice is sent to me by former patients of mine in the Crimea and the Kuban, from their own kitchen gardens. There's nothing else for it. You can't get it anywhere these days. He wiped his hands on a towel hanging from a nail and grew thoughtful for a moment. The grain processing book we published says that when grain is ground, up to 80% of beneficial content is lost. Up to 80%. The doctor raised a finger in the air. How low have we sunk when we damage a natural product to that extent, against all common sense, and we do it knowingly. Knowing we're damaging ourselves. It's just incredible. The doctor reached up to the shelf again. Now, here's the third and final ingredient, oats. Also unprocessed? Asked Natalia, swallowing. She was getting increasingly hungry. Naturally, Buteyko confirmed. In fact, of course, Natalia knew the recipe well. She'd frequently heard about the porridge, and had even had occasion to try it, but she wanted to make quite sure she had things straight by actually seeing it made. Warmed up now after the cold outside, she took her pale blue scarf from round her shoulders and hung it over the back of a chair. To my mind, 7 roads lead to the downfall of humanity. Characteristically, the doctor was moving directly from porridge to more universal questions. War, suicide by medication, he gave Natalia a sly wink, and doing things like grinding grain. Natalia interrupted swiftly. So, Doctor, the grain's in the coffee grinder. Now what? Oh, yes, said Buteyko, coming back to earth. Now, remember, we've put in equal parts to make up just the quantity we intend to eat. Now we switch the grinder on and grind it all up. Natalia watched the mixture of grains begin to swirl and jump behind the transparent casing of the grinder. We poured just a little water into the saucepan, enough just to cover the mixture once it's in the pan. He poured water into the saucepan to a depth of about 3 fingers' worth. We put it on the stove and bring it almost to boiling point, he said. He had the air of disclosing secrets of the inner sanctum. We finally chop an onion. We get some black pepper. He moved a pepper pot a little nearer, and now, before the water actually boils, we put in the ground-up grain mixture and then boil it for just a short time. 3-5 minutes, no more, until the first scum starts rising to the surface. He stirred the mixture in the pan. Now we mix in the onion and pepper, and we add a lot of salt. Buteyko bent down to get the salt from inside the lower compartment of the cupboard. Mind you don't spoil it by using that superior salt they sell in the shops. He tossed in a pinch of rather odd-coloured salt and took the pan off the heat. Shop-bought superior salt or iodized salt, it's no good for this, he explained as he carefully stirred the steaming, appetizingly fragrant gruel, giving it time to cool a little. That stuff's only any good for canteen food. Sometimes in the autumn, though, the shops sell coarse ground salt for pickling vegetables. 3 kopecks a kilogram. That'd be okay. Or the kind that's scattered on the ground in the countryside for the cattle. Really coarse stuff, in lumps. That would do as well. At least it's less refined than superior stuff that's been purified to within an inch of its life. Me, I'm lucky. I've got the very best natural salt." He proudly handed Natalia a green hand-painted salt cellar. Brilliant stuff, from the Azov Sea. Its composition is practically the same as human blood, very similar, and none of that wretched refining. They dig it out with spades from salt heaps which have evaporated in the sun, so it still contains masses of vital micronutrients. Natalia was so interested, she sniffed at the salt cellar. "I don't know what idiot came up with the idea of refining natural salt down to the superior state, when all that's left in it is sodium chloride. Shooting would be too good for the blighter." The doctor blew on the porridge. "First they refine it, then they iodize it, the clots. In its natural state, salt contains potassium, iodine, and lots of other things we need besides sodium chloride. But try telling them not to play God, not to mess with a substance formed over centuries and millennia. 'Oh, no, no, no,' say they. 'Let's refine it and iodize it.' And why? To find work for idle hands. That's the only reason." Buteyko tasted the brownish gruel and salted it again. Are you not overdoing it, Doctor?" Natalia put in cautiously. Instead of answering, the doctor held out the burnished wooden spoon to her. "Oh, I know, our esteemed doctor friends limit the use of salt, but you know my opinion on that. Ah, you've got kidney disease, eat less salt. Edema, eat less salt. Your blood pressure's up, don't overdo the salt. The Chuganovites blame salt for everything. It's not salt that's the problem, it's their own ignorance." Buteyko swallowed a spoonful of porridge. His eyes closed with pleasure, and his face, peppered with small red marks where long ago splinters of glass had been removed after a car accident, immediately relaxed. "You and I are in the method, and salt holds no fear for us. On the contrary, as we teach our patients in the lab, salt is absolutely vital." "Doctor, I know that when you're in the method, the metabolic processes intensify, salt loss from the body increases as well, and it's vital that that loss be replaced. But you've poured enough in the pan as it is," said Natalia, trying to justify herself. "You get on with eating, and argue about it afterwards," Buteyko replied, pushing the pan towards her. Natalia was extremely finicky about hygiene and found it a bit off-putting that he didn't put out any plates. Instead, he offered his guest a wooden spoon identical to his own, the kind used in the 19th century, to scoop the porridge straight out of the pan as he was doing. But on reflection, she realized that, as with everything Buteyko did, a ritual of this sort probably had some valid reason behind it, even if he didn't explain it to everyone. On the one hand, by eating dinner out of the same pan, it was as if the doctor was demonstrating his particular regard for her, an extravagant gesture of confidence, if you like. But on the other hand, don't forget, he's been poisoned 3 times, thought Natalia, recalling some of Buteyko's stories about his life. It might very well be that this common pot also guarded against any repetition of such attempts. After all kinds of people flocked to see him. It would be the work of a moment to slip a few groats in the gruel. And while she and the doctor did work together, the people who had poisoned him hadn't exactly been strangers either. "I've added a tiny touch of butter and sour cream just for you," Buteyko told her as he stirred the porridge. "The oil contained in the grain itself is generally more than enough, so it's just in honour of my guest." The hot, brownish-coloured porridge was very strong and very tasty. Swallowing spoonful after spoonful, Natalia noted with surprise that she was not missing the usual addition of meat to the garnish. Buteyko's onion, salt and pepper replaced everything. "Doctor," she said, scooping some porridge from the very middle, "when patients ask you about food, you often answer, 'Porridge and Borshch are our bread and butter.'" She licked the spoon hungrily. "Well, this is the porridge, and I'm really enjoying it. But what about Borshch à la Buteyko? I'd love to know how you make that too." The doctor turned round on his chair and took another jar from the windowsill. It had something greenish inside. "This is my Borshch," he said, opening the red screw-top lid. "You take dill, sorrel, parsley, and coriander, chop them finely, add salt, pour vinegar over it, chop it all carefully again. He let the greenish, vinegary-smelling salad fall out onto a clean plate. By all means, you can have some borshch before you have your porridge. It doesn't go off, and it doesn't turn sour. It's wonderful stuff. But now, the doctor screwed the red lid back on, you haven't come to see me this late in the day to talk about porridge and borshch, even if the porridge does lengthen my control pause, and therefore my body's reserves of strength too, by about a third. He drew back the chintz curtain. Look, it's getting dark already. I dare say your husband's wondering what's happened to you. What's on your mind? I got my plane ticket. Natalia opened her elegant handbag. And I've got all the travel documents for the Leningrad trip. But, she hesitated. Don't keep me guessing, urged the doctor. I get up at 4:30 in the morning, as you know, which means my brain's not working properly by now. He yawned wearily, covering his mouth with his hand. What's on your mind now? Natalia's attractive grey eyes took on a steely look. Nothing particular. I've talked everything through with you. I'll try not to fall for Chuganov's gimmicks, his powders and the infamous hellish brew. I'm going to clear a path for our method, not for their powders, and I won't forget that. She drank a mouthful of tea from a dark blue mug, which the doctor had politely pushed towards her. The thing is, Doctor, I don't know how to put this. She clasped the hot mug with both hands. Has Dr Buteyko worked with you a long time? Longer than you? Said Buteyko, suddenly alert. Why? You see, Natalia said with a decisive shake of the head, she had a kind of private chat with me before I set off. She said, of course, Dr Buteyko's a brilliant scholar and so on, but his abruptness and his direct manner do him more harm than good. People like Chuganov will never agree to recognize his discovery as it stands, far less solely under his name as sole author. They've their position, their name to consider, and if you'll forgive my saying so, our little lab is practically unknown. It's just not on the map. Oh dear, Natalia suddenly burst out, noticing Buteyko's face redden. Perhaps I shouldn't have told you. Dr Buteyko respects you and values you very highly. There's no doubt about that. Finish since you've started, said the doctor angrily. Why are you giving me the kid glove treatment? Natalia lowered her eyes. Well, Dr Buteyko suggested we shouldn't insist too rigidly on the method, and only the method. She said it would be good to try to arrive at some compromise, so as to satisfy both sides. And actually, Doctor, she was now returning Buteyko's direct gaze, wouldn't it be worth listening to your old comrades in arms? Dr Buteyko wishes you well, and you yourself were saying she's in line to be one of the first in our lab to defend her PhD dissertation. It's natural she should do what she can to ensure that you, as the lab scientific director, don't have quite so many enemies. Otherwise, she's no hope of getting her PhD. I'll tell you what she said to me. When Chuganov asked us to test out his powders in the lab, we could have agreed. We could use our equipment to test the efficacy of the powders, and in return they would start allowing the method to be used in Leningrad. That's the way of it in science. You scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours. And that's exactly what she said. Buteyko abruptly pushed aside the cold teapot. All sorts of things go on in science, Natalia. Natalia brought her hands out in front of her. Please, I beg of you, don't say anything to Dr Buteyko. She worries so much about you. She probably just wants what's best. We all want what's best, the doctor pronounced philosophically. Evening was drawing in, and he was tired out. But we approach our goal in different ways. I'm not offended by Dr Buteyko. She's on her own. She has a child to feed. Of course, she badly needs to get that PhD. But all the same, the doctor cleared the jars from the table, it's a bit rich of her to be looking for compromises as if she was Miss Flexibility herself. She didn't manage to find a compromise with her husband. He just upped and left her, whichever way you look at it. Why do you think that was? Natalia shrugged. All sorts of things happen in family life. She cast an eloquent look round the room, which wasn't very comfortable, more like a kitchen in a hostel. I know, Buteyko caught her meaning immediately and was quick to concur. People leave for all sorts of reasons, but still, don't you dare bring me any of Chuginov's powders. They're as much use to patients as a bandage on a corpse, and there'll be no help to us either. Actually, I know you wouldn't bring them anyway, even without me telling you." Natalia had stood up, and he followed suit, handing her the scarf she'd forgotten on the back of the chair. "You see, I know who to send to the Chuginovs of this world." He patted her shoulder encouragingly. "Some metals are stronger than pig iron."